Brave New World, Chapter 13. Henry Foster loomed up through the twilight of the embryo store. Like to come to a feely this evening? Lenina shook her head without speaking. Going out with someone else? It interested him to know which of his friends was being had by the other. Which is Benito, he questioned. She shook her head again. Henry detected the wariness of those purple eyes, the pallor beneath that glaze of lupus, the sadness at the corner of the unsmiling crimson mouth. "You're not feeling ill, are you?" he asked, a trifle anxiously, afraid that she might be suffering from one of the few remaining infectious diseases. Yet once more Lenina shook her head. "Anyhow, you ought to go and see the doctor," said Henry. "A doctor a day keeps the jim-jams away." He had heartily driven home his hypnopathic adage with a clap on the shoulder. "Perhaps you need a pregnancy substitute," he suggested, "or else an extra strong VPS treatment. Sometimes, you know, the standard passion surrogate isn't quite." "Oh, for Ford's sake," said Lenina, breaking her stubborn silence. "Shut up." And she turned back to her neglected embryos. VSP treatment indeed. She would have laughed if she hadn't been on the point of crying, as though she hadn't gotten enough VP of her own. She sighed profoundly as she refilled her syringe. "John," she murmured to herself, "John." Then Ford, she wondered. "Have I given the one it's sleeping sickness injection, or haven't I? Have I given this one?" She simply couldn't remember. In the end, she decided not to run the risk of letting it have a second dose and moved down the line to the next bottle. 20 years and 8 months and 4 days for that moment. A promising young Alpha Minus administrator at Mwanza was to die of trypanosomiasis, the first case in over half a century. Sighing, Lenina went on with her work. An hour later, in the changing room, Fanny was energetically protesting. "But it's absurd to let yourself get into a state like this. Simply absurd," she repeated. "And what about a man? One man? But he's the one I want." As though there weren't millions of other men in the world. "But I don't want them." "How can you know till you've tried?" "I have tried." "But how many?" asked Fanny, shrugging her shoulders contemptuously. "1, 2, dozens." But shaking her head, "It wasn't any good," she added. "Well, you must persevere," said Fanny sensuously. But it was obvious that her confidence in her own prescription had been shaken. Nothing can be achieved without perseverance. "But meanwhile, don't think of him." "I can't help it." "Take Soma then." "I do." "Well, go on." "But in the intervals, I still like him. I shall always like him." "Well, if that's the case," said Fanny with decision, "why don't you just go out and take him, whether he wants it or not?" "But if you knew how terribly queer he was." "All the more reason for taking a firm line." "It's all well to say that. Don't stand any nonsense. Act." Fanny's voice was a trumpet. She might have been a YWFA lecturer given an evening talk to an adolescent beta minuses. "Yes, act at once. Do it now." "I'd be scared," said Lenina. "Well, you only got to take half a gram of Soma first. And now I'm going to have a bath." She marched off, trailing her towel. The bell rang, and the savage, who was impatiently hoping that Helmholtz would come that afternoon, for having at last made up his mind to talk to Helmholtz about Lenina, he could not bear to postpone his confidence a moment longer, jumped up and ran to the door. "I had a premonition it was you, Helmholtz," he shouted as he opened it. On the threshold, in a white satin sailor suit, and with a round white cap rakishly tilted over her left ear, stood Lenina. "Oh," said the savage, as though someone had struck him with a heavy blow. Half a gram had been enough to make Lenina forget her fears and her embarrassment. "Hello, John," she said, smiling and walking past him into the room. Automatically, he closed the door and followed her. Lenina sat down. There was a long silence. "You don't seem very glad to see me, John," she said at last. "Not glad," the savage looked at her reproachfully, then suddenly fell on his knee before her, and taking Lenina's hand, reverently kissed it. "Not glad? Oh, if you only knew," he whispered, and ventured to raise his eyes to her face. "Admired Lenina," he went on. Indeed, the top of admiration, worth what's dearest in the world. She smiled at him with a luscious tenderness. Oh, you, so perfect, she was leaning toward him with parted lips. So perfect and so peerless are created. Nearer and nearer, and every creature's best. Still nearer, the savage suddenly scrambled to his feet. That's why, she said, speaking with an averted face, I wanted to do something first. I mean, to show you I was worthy of you. Not that I could ever really be that, but at any rate, to show I wasn't absolutely unworthy. I wanted to do something. Why should you think it necessary? Lenina began, but but left the sentence unfinished. There was a note of irritation in her voice. When one has leant forward, nearer and nearer, with parted lips, only to find yourself quite suddenly, as a clumsy oaf scrambles to his feet, leaning toward nothing, all well. There is a reason, even with half a gram of soma circulating in one's bloodstream, a genuine reason for annoyance. At Malpace, the savage was incoherently mumbled, you had to bring her the skin of mountain lion. I mean, when you wanted to marry someone, or else a wolf. There aren't any lions in England, Lenina almost snapped. And even if there were, the savage added with sudden contemptuous resentment, people would kill them out of helicopters, I suppose, with poison gas or something. I wouldn't do that, Lenina. He squared his shoulders. He ventured to look at her and met with a stare of annoyed incomprehension. Confused. I'll do anything, he went on, more and more incoherently, anything you tell me. There be some sports are painful, you know. But their labor, delight in them, sets off. That's what I feel. I mean, I'd sweep the floor if you wanted. But we've got a vacuum here, said Lenina in bewilderment. It isn't necessary. No, of course it isn't necessary, but some kinds of basenesses are noble ungone. I'd like to undergone. I'd like to undergo something nobly. Don't you see? But if there's a vacuum cleaner, that's not the point. And epsilon semi-morons to work them, she went on. Well, really, why? Why? But for you, just to show you that I... And what on earth vacuum cleaners have got to do with lions? To show how much. Or lions with being glad to see me. She was getting more and more exasperated. How much I love you, Lenina, he brought out almost desperately. An emblem of inner tide of startled elation, the blood rushed into Lenina's cheeks. Do you mean it, John? But I hadn't meant to say so, cried the savage, clasping his hands in a kind of agony. Not until... Listen, Lenina, in Malpace people get married. Get what? The irritation had begun to creep back into her voice. What was he talking about now? For always. They make a promise to live together for always. What a horrible idea! Lenina was genuinely shocked. Outliving beauties outward with a mind that cloth renews swifter than blood decays. What? It's like that in Shakespeare too. If thou cost break her virgin not before all the sanctimonious ceremonies may with full and holy rite. For Ford's sake, John, talk sense. I can't understand a word you say. First it's vacuum cleaners, then it's knots. You're driving me crazy. She jumped up and, as though afraid that he might run away from her physically, as well as with his mind, caught him by the wrist. Answer me this question. Do you really like me or don't you? There was a moment silence, then, in a very low voice, I love you more than anything in the world, he said. Then why on earth didn't you say so? She cried. And so intense with her exasperation that she drove her sharp nails into the skin on his wrist, instead of driveling away about knots and vacuum cleaners and lions and making me miserable for weeks. She released his hand and flung it angrily away from her. If I didn't like you so much, she said, I'd be furious with you. And suddenly her arms were round his neck. He felt her lips against his soft own. He felt her lips soft against his own. So deliciously soft, so soft and warm that inevitably he found himself thinking of the embrace in the 3 weeks in a helicopter. Oh, the stereoscopic blonde and the more than real blackamoor. Horror. He fired to disengage himself, but Lenina tightened her embrace. Why didn't you say so? She whispered, drawing back her face to look at him. Her eyes were tenderly reproachful. The murkiest den, the most opulent place, the voice of conscience thundered poetically. The strongest suggestion of our worser genius can and shall melt mine honor into lust. Never, he resolved. You silly boy, she was saying. I wanted you so much, and if you wanted me too, why didn't you? But Lenina, he began protesting. and as she immediately untwined her arms and she stepped away from him, she thought for a moment that she had taken his unspoken hint. But when she unbuckled her white patent cartridge belt and hung it carefully over the black back of the chair, he began to suspect that he had been mistaken. Lenina, he repeated apprehensively. Lenina, he repeated apprehensively. She put her hand to her neck and gave a long vertical pull. The white sailor's blouse was ripped to the hem. Suspicion condensed into a too solid certainty. Lenina, what are you doing? Zip, zip. Her answers were wordless. She stepped out of her bell-bottom trousers. Her zipakaminkonik were a pale shell pink. The Arch Community songster's gold teeth dangled at her breast. For those milky paps that through the window bars bore at men's eyes, the singing, thundering, magical words made her seem double dangerous, double alluring, soft, about what piercing, boring, drilling into reason, tunneling through resolution. The strongest oaths are straw to the fire in the blood. Be more abstemious, or else. Zip. The rounded pinkness fell apart like a neatly divided apple. A wrinkle of the arms, a lift first of the right foot and the left, and the Zippa Minkiniks were lying lifeless as though deflated on the floor. Still wearing her shoes and socks, her rankishly tilted round white cap, she advanced toward him. Darling, darling, if only you'd said so before. She held out her arms. But instead of saying darling, darling, and holding out his arms, the savage retreated in terror, flapping his hands at her as though he were trying to scare away some intruder or dangerous animal. 4 backward steps, and he brought to the bay against the wall. Sweet, said Lenina, and laying her hands on his shoulders, pressed herself against him. Put your arms around me, she commanded. Hug me till you drug me, honey. She, too, had poetry at her command, new words that sang and were spells and beat drums. Kiss me. She closed her eyes. She let her voice sink to a sleepy murmur. Kiss me till I'm in a coma. Hug me, coma. Hug me, honey, snugly. The savage caught her by the wrist, tore her hands from his shoulders, thrust her roughly away at arm's length. Ow, you're hurting me. Ow, you're... She was suddenly silent. Terror had maddened her, had made her forget the pain. Opening her eyes, she had seen his face. No, not his face, a ferocious stranger's, pale, distorted, twitching with some insane, inexplicable fury. Aghast. But what is it, John? She whispered. He did not answer, but only stared into her face with those mad eyes. The hands that held her wrists were trembling. He breathed deeply, irregularly, faint almost to imperceptibility, but appalling. She suddenly heard the kneading of his teeth. What is it? She almost screamed. And as though awakened by her cry, he caught her by the shoulder and shook her. Whore! He shouted. Whore! Impudent strumpet! Oh, don't! She protested in a voice made grotesquely tremulous by shaking. Whore! Please! Damned whore! A gram is better, she began. The savage pushed her away with such force that she strangled and fell. Go, he shouted, standing over her menacingly. Get out of my sight or I'll kill you, he clenched his fist. Lenina raised her arms to cover her face. Please don't, John. Hurry up, quick. One arm still raised and following her every moment with terrified eyes, she scrambled to her feet and, still crouching, still covering her head, made a dash for the bathroom. The noise of the prodigious slap made by her departure was accelerated with a pistol shot. Ow! Oh, was accelerated like a pistol shot. Ow! Lenina bound forward. Safely locked in the bathroom, she had leisure to take stock of her injuries. Standing with her back to the mirror, she twisted her head. Looking over her left shoulder, she could see the imprint of an open hand standing out distinct and crimson on pearly flesh. Gingerly, she rubbed the wounded spot. Outside in the other room, the savage was striding up and down, marching to the drum and music of magical words. The wren must to it, and the small gliding fly does leecher in my sight. Maddeningly they rumbled in his ears. The Fichu nor the soiled horse go to it with a more righteous appetite. Down from the waist they are centaurs, though women all above. But to the girdle do the gods' inherence. Beneath it is beneath is all the fiends. There's hell, there's darkness, there is sulphurous pit, burning, scalding, stench, consumption. Fie, 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 pain, pain. Give me an ounce of civet, good apothecary to sweeten my imagination. John, ventured a small, ingratiating voice from the bathroom. John, O thou weed, you are so lovely fair, smell is so sweet that the sense aches at thee. Was this mostly good book made to write whore upon? Heaven stop the nose at it. But her perfume still hung about him. The jacket was white with the powder that had scented her velvety body. Impudent strumpet, impudent strumpet, impudent strumpet. The inexorable rhythm beat itself out. Impudent. John, do you think I might have my clothes? He picked up the bell-bottom trousers, the blouse, the zipper mickelnicks. Open, he said, kicking the door. No, I won't. The voice was frightened and defiant. Well, how do you expect me to give them to you? Push them through the ventilator over the door. He did what she suggested and returned to an uneasy pacing of the room. Impudent strumpet, the devil luxury with his fat rump and potato finger. John, he would not answer. Fat rump and potato finger. John, what is it? He said gruffly. I wonder if you mind giving me my Malthusian belt. Lenina sat, listening to the footsteps in the other room, wondering as she listened how long he was likely to go traipsing up and down like that, whether she would have to wait until he left the flat, or if it would be safe, after allowing his madness a reasonable time to subside, to open the bathroom door and make a dash for it. She was interrupted in the midst of these uneasy speculations by the sound of the telephone ringing in the other room. Abruptly, the trampling ceased. She heard the voice of the savage parleying with silence. Hello? Yes. If I do not usurp myself, I am. Yes. Didn't you hear me saying so? Mr. Savage speaking. What? Who's ill? Of course it interests me. But is it serious? Is she really bad? I'll go at once. Not in her room anymore? Where has she been taken? Oh God, what's the address? 3 Park Lane, is that it? 3? Thanks. Lenina heard the click of the replaced receiver, then hurrying steps. A door slammed. There was a silence. Was he really gone? With an affinity of precaution, she opened the door a quarter of an inch, peeped through the cracks, and was encouraged by the view of emptiness. Opened a little further and put her whole head out, finally tiptoed into the room, stood for a few seconds and was strongly beating heart, listening, then darted to the front door, opened, slipping through, slammed, ran. It was not till she was in the lift and actually dropped down the well that she began to feel herself secure. That is the end of chapter 13.